The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with over 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. And by the way, there is a brand new news feed on the blog that I think you'll find interesting, that you could subscribe to by following me on Twitter. Just add Gary Baumgarten, Baumgarten, to your Twitter feed, and you can watch that news feed as we update it throughout the day. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten, welcoming you to the show. Well, President Obama is in Mexico today to discuss with that nation's president, Felipe Calderon, ways to stop the drug war there, a war that has overflowed the borders into the United States. The president has indicated that he supports a treaty that would commit the nations of this hemisphere to work together to fight the flow of arms to the drug cartels and the flow of narcotics to other countries, including the United States. We're going to hopefully bring you the president's official arrival in Mexico City on a feed that we are anticipating from C-SPAN momentarily. But for the moment, until then and following, we are pleased to have returning to the show Laura Carlsen. She is director of the Americas program of the International Relations Center. She received a Fulbright Scholarship to study the impact of the Mexican economic crisis on women in 1986 and has since lived in Mexico City, so she's very well positioned in many respects to help us understand what's going on with this brief visit to Mexico City, the first in about a dozen years by any U.S. president. Welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Hello, Gary, and hello to all the listeners.
Well, we're really pleased to have you here with us again. Tell me how important this move is, this symbolic visit to Mexico City by the President of the United States.
Well, this is not only President Obama's first visit to Mexico, but it's also his first visit to any country in Latin America in his whole life, not just in his presidency. And so it's quite significant in that sense. It's also symbolic of what the Obama administration has insisted is a renewed priority on Mexico. It's one of its closest neighbors, of course, and trade partner under the North American Free Trade Agreement. And this is a welcome sign in that sense to the people of Mexico as well.
But realistically, with all the corruption that is going on in Mexico, and you don't know whose side some of the authorities are even on, both those who are on the ground in uniform and those who are off the ground wearing suits and ties, how effective can the United States involvement in trying to help stem the flow of drugs here and the flow of guns there, and to try to stop this drug war that has obviously overflowed the borders? How effective can this U.S. government, this administration actually be?
Well, that's exactly the question. In my opinion, with this model of a war on drugs, which has been applied since the 70s, was developed by President Nixon and was applied, of course, in this hemisphere under Plan Colombia since the year 2000, I don't believe it's going to be effective at all. In fact, one of the things that's been very disappointing about the way in which the Obama administration has made overtures to Mexico is that it has been so centered on this security issues, and particularly on so-called helping Mexico to win the drug war. Many people in Mexico, in fact, the majority, according to recent polls, do not believe that this is a winnable war, although they generally support the president and do believe that organized crime is a threat to the society. But the way in which they've gone about it, which is this model which is based on interdiction and enforcement, which means cutting off the supply of illegal drugs to the U.S. market and breaking up the drug cartels in that way, is a completely ineffective model, and we have a lot of historical evidence to prove that. It has also had terrible side effects for Mexico. We're seeing that over the past year especially. In the year 2007, there were about 2,500 drug-related deaths, and in the year 2008, with this model in full swing, there have been over 6,000. So this means that there's been a high toll in terms of violence in the street. Part of this is due to the fact that the drug cartels have been destabilized in the way that they divided up the country and the routes, and there have been a lot of those murders that have to do with rivalries between drug cartels. A lot of it has to do with confrontations between law enforcement. But as you mentioned, there's this serious problem of knowing who the good guys and who the bad guys are. Because even in the case of the murder of law enforcement agencies, it turns out when you scratch the surface that some of those have to do with one drug cartel executing a law enforcement agent or a member of the military who was actually actively working with the rival cartel. So we have a lot of resources, both in military equipment and in military training, coming down from the United States. We know from the high rate of desertion and from the high rate of corruption that exists within the military and within the police forces here in Mexico, that much of those resources, whether it's the training and the knowledge of how the operations against the drug cartels work, as well as much of that equipment, will end up in the hands of the drug cartels.
We are waiting President Obama to take the podium at Los Pinos, the Pines, which is the Mexican version of the U.S. White House, and we will be bringing that to you live as soon as he does. In the meantime, our guest, hopefully before and after his talk, depending on how long he goes, is Laura Carlsen, Carlsen. She is director of the Americas program of the International Relations Center, and joining us live from Mexico City. So I would imagine the macro way of addressing this issue, but this is a long-term way of looking at things, would be to help Mexico improve its economic situation and maybe cut down on the demand for drugs, as Hillary Clinton suggested as recently as Wednesday. In other places, such as the United States, that might help. But in the short term, it seems to me that you have to stop the bleeding, and that means securing the borders. But the previous administration has been unsuccessful in doing this. Is there any hope that this administration, with these new efforts, the interdiction that is being ordered as a result of what's been going on, and the appointment of a so-called border czar by Homeland Security, do you think that that's going to have any kind of a measurable impact positively on the situation?
Well, there probably are no short-term solutions to this problem, as you mentioned.